Sophia's lithe figure cut through the air, her body a perfect arc as she plummeted towards the shimmering pool below. The crowd held its breath, mesmerized by her grace and precision. She was already a legend in the making, her olive skin and raven hair a stark contrast against the azure waters of the Olympic diving pool. As she surfaced, the roar of applause was deafening. Sophia's emerald eyes scanned the crowd, searching for the one face that mattered most, her coach, Elena. But Elena wasn't there. She hadn't been for days, and the gnawing pit in Sophia's stomach grew deeper with each passing moment. The official story was that Elena had suffered a tragic accident, a fall from her balcony after a night of celebration. But Sophia knew better. The night before her disappearance, Elena had been agitated, her usually calm demeanor replaced by a frantic energy. She had pulled Sophia aside, her voice barely above a whisper as she spoke of corruption, of dark dealings within the Olympic Committee. "They're using the games as a cover, Sophia," Elena had hissed, her eyes darting nervously. "Human trafficking, money laundering, it goes all the way to the top. I have proof, but I need more time. Promise me you'll be careful." Those were the last words Elena ever spoke to her protégé. The next morning, her broken body was found on the pavement below her apartment, her neck twisted at an unnatural angle, her once vibrant eyes now dull and lifeless. Sophia's thoughts were interrupted by a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Ava, Elena's daughter, standing behind her. Ava was a striking figure, her mother's piercing blue eyes set in a face framed by a shock of platinum blonde hair. As a journalist, Ava had her mother's tenacity and thirst for truth. "We need to talk," Ava said, her voice low and urgent. "Not here. Meet me at the cafe on Rue de la Paix in an hour." An hour later, Sophia found herself in a dimly lit corner of the cafe, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee she had no intention of drinking. Ava slid into the seat across from her, her eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. "My mother was murdered," Ava said without preamble, her voice cracking. "And I think I know why." Over the next hour, Ava laid out a web of corruption so intricate and far-reaching that Sophia felt her head spin. The Olympic Committee, it seemed, was merely a facade for a much darker organization. Human trafficking rings used the influx of visitors during the games to smuggle people across borders. Money laundering schemes funneled millions through fake sponsorship deals and inflated construction contracts. "But why kill Elena?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because she was close to exposing it all," Ava replied, sliding a USB drive across the table. "This contains everything she uncovered: names, dates, bank accounts. But it's not enough. We need concrete proof, something that will bring the whole house of cards tumbling down." As they delved deeper into Elena's investigation, Sophia and Ava found themselves in a world far darker than they could have imagined. They uncovered a network of underground facilities where trafficked individuals were held, their bodies and minds broken by unimaginable tortures. They traced money trails that led to offshore accounts belonging to some of the most respected names in international sports. But the true horror lay in the twisted minds behind it all. At the center of the web sat Viktor Kozlov, the charismatic head of the Olympic Committee. His public persona was that of a jovial grandfather figure, always ready with a warm smile and a kind word. But behind closed doors, he was a monster. Sophia and Ava discovered that Kozlov's cruelty knew no bounds. He had clawed his way to the top through a combination of charm, cunning, and utter ruthlessness. Those who stood in his way had a habit of disappearing, their bodies often turning up months later in remote locations, bearing signs of prolonged torture. But even Kozlov was just a cog in a larger machine. As they dug deeper, Sophia and Ava uncovered a cabal of international power brokers who used the Olympics as their personal playground. These were men and women who had long ago lost touch with their humanity, viewing people as mere commodities to be bought, sold, and discarded at will. One such figure was Madame Rousseau, a former gymnast whose promising career had been cut short by a devastating injury. Bitter and twisted by her loss, she had channeled her rage into building a trafficking empire. Her specialty was young athletes, lured with promises of glory, and then broken down through a combination of drugs, psychological manipulation, and physical abuse. As Sophia and Ava's investigation progressed, the danger grew. They began to notice shadowy figures following them. Their hotel rooms were ransacked, and threatening messages were left on their phones. But they pressed on, driven by a need for justice and the memory of Elena. The climax came on the eve of the women's platform diving final. Sophia, despite the turmoil of the past weeks, had managed to qualify for the event. As she prepared in her room, her mind racing with thoughts of both the competition and the investigation, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Ava, her face pale and drawn. "They know," she whispered. "They're coming for us. We need to end this now." Their plan was desperate and dangerous. During the final, while all eyes were on the pool, Ava would break into Kozlov's office and retrieve the final piece of evidence they needed. A ledger detailing every transaction, every victim, every corrupt official involved in the scheme. As Sophia climbed the steps to the diving platform for her final dive, her heart pounded, not just with pre-competition nerves, but with fear for Ava's safety. She could see Kozlov in the VIP box, his grandfatherly smile never reaching his cold, calculating eyes. Sophia stood at the edge of the platform, her toes curling over the precipice. In that moment, time seemed to stand still. She thought of Elena, of the countless victims whose lives had been destroyed, of Ava risking everything for the truth. With a deep breath, she launched herself into the air. Her body twisted and turned with perfect precision, but her mind was elsewhere. As she hit the water with barely a splash, the crowd erupted in cheers. But Sophia barely heard them as she surfaced, her eyes immediately searching for any sign of Ava. Minutes ticked by like hours as Sophia waited, her body on autopilot as she went through the motions of accepting her gold medal. And then, just as she thought all hope was lost, she saw Ava burst into the arena, a manila envelope clutched in her hand. What followed was chaos. Security guards converged on Ava, but she managed to pass the envelope to a nearby journalist before being tackled to the ground. Kozlov's face contorted with rage as he realized what was happening, his mask of benevolence slipping to reveal the monster beneath. In the days that followed, the world watched in horror as the full extent of the corruption was revealed. The Olympic Committee was dissolved, its members arrested or fleeing justice. Kozlov himself was found dead in his cell, having apparently taken his own life rather than face the consequences of his actions. But the story didn't end there. As the dust settled, Sophia and Ava found themselves facing a world forever changed. The victims they had helped free struggled to rebuild their shattered lives, their eyes haunted by memories of unspeakable horrors. The sports world, once a beacon of hope and inspiration, was now viewed with suspicion and mistrust. And for Sophia and Ava, the weight of what they had uncovered was almost too much to bear. They had won, but at what cost? Elena was still gone, and no amount of justice could bring her back. The gold medal that hung around Sophia's neck felt cold and meaningless in the face of all they had lost. As they stood together on the banks of the Seine, watching the sun set on a Paris forever changed, Sophia turned to Ava. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ava's eyes, so like her mother's, were filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "We keep fighting," she said, "for Elena, for all the victims, for the truth. It's what she would have wanted." And so, as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the horizon, Sophia and Ava set off into an uncertain future. They had exposed the darkness at the heart of the Olympics, but they knew their work was far from over. The fight for justice, they realized, was a never-ending one. But as long as there were people willing to stand up for what was right, there was hope. And in that moment, walking side by side into the gathering darkness, they clung to that hope with all their might.